Could you describe when you heard about Pearl Harbor and what effect did it have on you and your family?
Yeah, it was on December the 7th, about 11 o'clock on Sunday morning when I heard about it. And I was with my family and our residents in McPherson, Kansas. It came over the radio that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. That was the initial word I had of it. I didn't need another. Didn't have to be told more than once. That was good enough. I understood. Okay.
Where were you living at the time?
McPherson, Kansas. McPherson. It's a little town up there about 75 miles north of Wichita.
And did you draft or did you enlist?
No, I went and enlisted. As a matter of fact, I went down and enlisted. I think I went down that January, and they were really screwed up. I mean, you can imagine what was happening. And I had to go to Fort Riley, Kansas to sign up, and they had one Air Corps guy there, and of course everybody wanted to get in the Air Corps. And so he told me to go home and get my teeth fixed. And so I had to go home and spend $50 of my dough to get my teeth fixed to get in their Air Force. But that's the way it worked out. Otherwise, they didn't get in. I don't think. Anything. What he wanted to do basically was get these people out of there so he could figure out how he could get out too. That's what he was after.
Why did you pick the service branch that you joined?
Well, I had started flying when I was a kid, about on and off 16 on up. And then I got in that civilian pilot training program that Mr. Roosevelt put into all throughout the United States. I don't know if you even know anything about it, but I'll give you a quick dissertation. If you were in land grant college of any kind, then you were going to have a CPT program was authorized for that college. And that CPT stands for Civilian Pilot Training. And what they would do to give you training to get a private pilot's license. So this happened at the Oklahoma Military Academy, where you were going to, we got all through there, you're going to be a second lieutenant in the cavalry, so everybody was interested in the CPT program. And there's some damn good men in there, and a lot of them went on to, they got their names written on several things, okay. And so I went with that and got a private pilot's license, but I didn't do another flying after that. I couldn't afford to. Nobody could afford to. But the only ones that could afford to do this was government. So we started out, we were flying Piper Cubs, and hell, I remember when things really got red hot, somebody got a 65 horse Cub up there. We'd been flying a 40 horsepower Cub, and that was a red hot rascal. I mean, hell, it might go 5 miles an hour faster than the other guy. And then I went from there. That seemed to me that I had a chance to use it, and so the Air Corps wanted them, of course, and it saved them a lot of time and trouble. It didn't save them any trouble, it saved them a little time, so. And so we were, I think they took the whole damn works. I'm not sure, I don't know how many they trained, but I'm sure they used them all, one way or another.
Do you recall your first days in the service? What did it
First
feel
days
like
in what?
in the service, when you finally enlisted and went off to boot camp, and what did it feel like?
Oh, my wife will get that. Well, this is all nothing new to me. I've been a GI in the National Guard, so I had been in the service before. So all they did was they cut me some orders to go down to Williams Field, Arizona. And the reason they sent us, I don't know why nobody sent us down there, there wasn't anything down there, but that was the reason they sent us down there. There wasn't anything there to do. You couldn't hurt anybody, you couldn't cause trouble. They had some barracks built down there. There wasn't any flying. This is just a cadet accumulation point where you're going to start in learning how to drill. Well, hell, that was old stuff. I like that. It's easy. And then after that, well, then I got into the flying end of it.
How did the Army Air Corps determine who would train as a fighter pilot versus, say, a bomber pilot?
They never told us that. I can tell you with great honesty that we never knew. Nobody knew what they were going to do. That was decided in Washington based on what their plans were and how far they were in their losses within what. And that's what decided what they were going to draw on. Now remember, this Air Force didn't have, Air Corps did not have any fighter combat experience. The only thing we know, we got the hell kicked out of ourselves over in the Philippines and in Hawaii. Hell, nobody knew anything. We hadn't done anything. Unfortunately, I got to know somebody who was down there, work with them. I know damn good and well what I'm talking about. So they didn't know. And this was all just planning. They used the English experience, I guess. That if you put 35,000 in there, you're going to lose 20% of it. So this is what they based a lot of their actions on, things like that. Probably statistics of other people's operations more than anything else. So, but once you got into cadets, as a cadet, well, you didn't have any say-so at all about what you're going to do. You just followed orders like anybody else. So, I always wanted to be a fighter pilot. I thought I'd do very well at it. I tried hard, and apparently they thought I did good enough to send me down there to. If you were going to go to if you're going to be a fighter pilot, there's only about 2 or 3 places you graduate from. One of them was Luke Field in Phoenix, Arizona, which is still turning out fighter pilots to this day. And there's another place down in Florida. There's probably 2 or 3 more scattered around, advanced schools. And the training was no different whether you were going to go to bombers or fighters, but that was where you went for advanced single-engine training. They also had advanced multi-engine schools, which were actually twin engines, what they were. They called it multi, but well, it's true, it's more than one. So anyway, but they didn't have 4-engine school. So you learned fighters per se after you got out of advanced, and you learned bombardment within itself after you got out of advanced. You went to a transition school, and that's where they started you in a twin engine. And then after they could find out that you can handle more than one engine and keep the airplane in the air, and they'll move you over someplace else. Okay, and then eventually some damn old group's gonna get stuck with you, and that's what the West Coast. It was 328th, I believe was the name of it, and everybody went to the damn 328th. I don't care who you were, and hell, good guys like Tommy Hayes. Hell, he went through the 328th Fighter Group before he got to the Philippines, and so. Certain groups get stuck like that, you know. Man, they didn't get to keep any of the good ones. All they got to do the stuff that wasn't any good. That wasn't ever pulled out or left there. So they didn't do great. Okay, what's next?
Next question would be specific. Was there any specific training that involved being a fighter pilot? Was there specific trainers that were used? Were certain exercises that were employed?
The answer to your question is yes, there is for each one of the phases you care to select, talk about. Mm-hmm. We killed about 13 guys in the United States just learning how to handle the airplane. Mm-hmm. So nobody was shooting at us when we lost it. These guys are they'd fly into a mountain and hit something, or they'd hit somebody else in the air or something like that. So the airplane was not a forgiving airplane. It was that P-39, which you see right there. Now, it's the most unforgiving aircraft that Uncle Sam ever spent $1.50 for. And that's about what it was worth. It was murderous and treacherous. But if you can manage to get about 150, 200 hours of time in a P-39, you're a pretty well qualified fighter pilot. Now you may not be combat ready, but you're getting them on the right way.
Okay. What route did you take from the United States to England?
That was a good deal. We went across in the Queen Elizabeth. There was only 2 big ones, the Queen Elizabeth, and what was the other one? Queen Mary? No. I guess they were both the same, yeah. And the Elizabeth was younger, but they managed to put, I'll swear, one time I said 14,000. I think I'm wrong. I think it was 17,000 men on that damn boat. And boy, they had some real sharp cats running that thing, clearly. Because what they did, they managed to work it so they got out of New York and they go out and get in the foulest weather they can find and stay in it because they know it's going to go to England. And that's exactly what we did. We went out there, and about 5 days later, 4 or 5 days later, we pulled into the Clyde up in Scotland. And hell, that was it. Get them off now. And they fed us twice a day, which is really, when you stop and think about it, the English didn't have a hell of a lot. They could have used that food at home. But they fed us twice a day, which was good. And it was a good trip. I never saw the sun. I remember the whole damn trip. It was right in that storm all the way. And it was good meteorologists, believe me. They decided what the pattern of that ship was going to be. And I don't think they're worried much about submarines because it sails such a high speed and run around about 30, 35 knots. The one that's sub in the world will get more than one shot at it, and then he's damn lucky if he could hit it. So, and they never had any trouble with that thing running all over the world. They just had to check troops down in the South Pacific and all that kind of stuff. They did a good job.
When did you arrive in England?
I got there in 1943, November 43.
November 43. Was this your first trip out of the United States?
Yes, I believe it was. Outside of going to Mexico and I was flying around in training programs, things like that. But as far as getting across any water, yes, the answer is yes.
What fighter wing or squadron were you assigned to?
The 357th Fighter Group was my original assignment for combat purposes. That group was assembling in Tonopah, Nevada. And I joined them with the position of a flight leader. And I was lucky. I got a good job and it was a good group. It ended up being a very good group.
Where exactly were you stationed in England? Where did you fly out of?
We were stationed in a place called Leiston, Leiston, which they've got a number for those things. I don't know what 373 or something like that. No matter. Anyway, that's what we did. We went to Leiston. There's a lot of other stories involved with it. But after we got there, then we saw our first P-51. We didn't know what we were going to fly. We didn't have any idea. Nobody was flying 51. My God, here's a P-51 comes in there, and the guy gets out of it. Well, left it. And somebody, I think one of the junior pilots from someplace, had been in one of those things down in Florida. And so we started checking ourselves out in the P-51. In those days, checkout was probably a lot different than it is today. I hope to God it is much different than what. Because all you had was a book. You could read the book, and there's the airplane. You could start the motor. And you get the motor started, go fly. And that's it. And there isn't any dual time or anything like that. It's unheard of because you didn't have the facilities for it. And they didn't have the time for it. And they needed for you to get that airplane, learn how to fly it, and get in the air and fight with it. That's what they needed. That's what we did. And we did a good job of it.
With that being said, did you receive any additional training on fighter tactics when you arrived, or was it learn as you go?
Well, teach yourself along the way. Now we can teach the others what we thought we knew. If anybody pay attention to it, they'll pay attention to you. They will, because you take any position of leadership like that, of any position, it doesn't make any difference what it's in. You've got to make arrangements for yourself and other people to handle it. That's all there is to it. That's what the definition of leadership is. So these poor old boys, they were stuck with me to start with. They had 8, I think that's what we had in the flight. And when we got there, the combat strength of a squadron was 16. The combat strength of a group, was that 46? Yeah, and so that's what we'd put up on a good day if everything was working. We had nothing but good days, so believe me. The mechanics did a fantastic job of keeping those aircraft available and running. The only thing that stopped us, the most treacherous thing in the world, is the horrible weather of Western Europe. And it caused a hell of a lot of casualty to anybody's Air Force. I don't care whose it was, English, German, any of them. That was our biggest problem.
Well, what model P-51 did you fly?
All of the B's and C's, and the only difference between those two is the point of origin where they originated. Some of them were made in California. The Bakers, the B's were in California. I think the C Charlies came out of Dallas. I don't know, but they're identically the same airplane. There wasn't any major changes. And then when the Dog came along, there was profound changes. They utilized all the changes that they'd heard about or thought about had been given to them by men who had the 51 B's and C's in action. Now, I never flew the P-51A. It was originally designed supposedly for ground strafing. and dive bombing in the Mediterranean. But hell, you couldn't dive bomb anything on that damn airplane. It was too fast, too slick. You're going downhill in a hurry. What you want to do is go downhill slow, so that you can hit something. You don't hit anything on the 51.
Were you called on to do
One
ground?
time we did a dive bombing job. Trying to think of where. It didn't make a difference where it was. The interesting part of it was, I know I did not hit the damn airfield. It was supposed to be dive bombing a German airfield. And we came back and everybody was about the same breed of cat's eye. Well, they hadn't hit it either. But then we started hearing from the French what a wonderful job we'd done. And I thought, my God, this is fantastic. Because I didn't hit the airfield. I missed the airfield. Bombs went in the damn forest or someplace like that. The Germans had taken the airplanes out of the airport and taken them out to hide them out in the forest, and that's where the damn bombs went. So they come out thinking we were smarter than hell, and we were just lucky. And that's the truth. And then that was most of the thing. But the bulk of our work was basically escorting heavy bombers, E-17, B-24s.
What was the name of your plane, and why did you name it that?
It's a rather bad name. The name of the airplane was Billy's Bitch, and as I have talked a little bit every once in a while about this, one time a little girl come up to me and said, "Why did you call the airplane that?" I said, "Because that's exactly what it was. It was unforgiving. It was and wonderful to look at, beautiful. And when it's well dressed and well painted, boy, it just looks beautiful. It'll kill you quicker than anything in the world if you're not ahead of it. You better get there and stay there." So I got my own airplane. That's what I named it. And then when I had the 51s, it's just a holdover. I named it and just went from transfer. But that's the way a lot of them went.
What was required to complete your tour? How many hours or how many missions?
There's an interesting point. When we first got there, the bomber boys, I think, were pulling 10 or 15 missions or something like that. And somebody in the 8th Air Force all of a sudden woke up and said, "My God, we're not going to have any Air Force left. If we do this, so we're going to extend the tour. You're going to do 25 missions." Okay. Now, they flew a mission. They didn't go. That means leave the ground and go someplace, drop some bomb, and come back. The length of time they're out did not count to anybody. They'd be gone about 10 hours, sometimes maybe longer, I don't know. But I imagine they're going to be running a little shy of gas about that time. So we would make rendezvous with them, usually within about, let's say 100 miles of the bombing target. And our job was to give them target area support to defend them from our point of rendezvous until through the target area. And usually they'd be under escort when they left with the Spitfires, and then the Jugs would pick them up and take them as far as they could. And if we got lucky, we might find a 38 or two in the target area with us, because 38s and the 51s are the only ones that had the range that could get in to where they were going to be bombing. And they were bombing. I've been to Posen, Poland. That's a long damn way from Leicester, England. And particularly in bad weather, it's worse. So that was what we had to do, and basically get up there and defend them when the Germans would attack. And they were going to attack them. And every time they get something in their favor, you might well plan on it. They're coming, and they will. So just go ahead and make your plans accordingly.
You mentioned that you flew a mission over Poland. What were some other typical mission targets or objectives?
Well, the 8th Air Force had been, I'm going to say this quite frankly, rather poorly led well, I don't really know that. I'm just guessing that. But we're not doing anything of great effort until Doolittle came up there and got the 8th Air Force. Remember, he had been running the 11th and the 15th in the Mediterranean, and he knew what combat was, because actually he flew the first combat mission against the Japs, successfully. And he probably got in the air in Italy. I know he didn't, but they would not let him get in the air in England. They told him, "Nope, that's it, you're not going to go." So he was kind of mad because they didn't get bomb Berlin. Then he got drop bomb on every capital in there, thinking that's pretty good. But he was the guy who more or less put the fighters, let them go do what they do best, which is move around in the sky, move from wherever the bombers were. Originally, we went in, we had to stay real close to the bombers so they could see us like that. Well, that's not tactical, the best tactical employment of that weapon. That weapon needs to be out advanced above them and to the side, where it can gain, by its altitude and position, can gain an advantage over any attacking aircraft. That's what you want. Well, Bomber Command didn't see it that way. They wanted to look out there and see that P-51. Were they doing them any good out there or not? They didn't think about that end of it. So Doolittle did. And he released the fighters to just, his instructions were, I want that German Air Force destroyed. Period. They don't care how. You get them out of here. And they were gone. And by the time Eisenhower got ready to invade, you didn't have to worry about the German Air Force. They're gone. That's all there is to it.
What were some of the tactics that you used to down enemy aircraft or to avoid being shot down?
Well, the best thing to do to avoid being shot down is, of course, you don't go. But you've got to go. So the best thing is that if you see the other guy first, you've got half the battle is already won right there. If you see him first, then you can either get away from him if he's coming at you, or you think he's going to take a path at you, or you can position yourself to destroy him. This is what you seek. Therefore, early recognition of the enemy is the primary thing. The second thing is get in close, but don't get so damn close you make a fool of yourself by accident, because that happens, and it happens to more people than you can shake a stick at. They had heard that preached the RAF. You say, get close, get close. I think maybe they're rationing ammunition or something, because they wanted to get within about 50 yards and open fire. Well, hell, those guns were synchronized to cross at about, I think it was about 300 feet out there, about 100 yards or something like that. But you don't have to get 25 yards behind them. Besides that, the pieces you shoot off come back, and somebody's going to get hit with the pieces, and we lost a lot of guys. I lost my best flight leader, collision with debris, because he got too close. And so I think if you just get a little bit of thinking is as good as anything. Just open fire when you think you can hit him. Get close enough to that. But don't ram the damn gun barrels down his throat and pull the trigger. You can kill him just as easy at 100 yards as you can at 75 yards or 50 yards. And so that's a second thing. And the only other tactic that I know of is be ready. Just be mentally prepared that you want to kill them. That's the only reason you're over there. It's to destroy them. So to keep that in your mind. You're not over there to drink beer and play with the girls. It's later on. You get that tiny crowd first. Therefore, that's all you have to do. And most of them, I've never heard anybody have too much of a problem with that. Just remember, he's not going to take it easy on you. That's all there is to it.
How effective were the 50 caliber Browning machine guns that were used in the Mustang at down enemy aircraft?
They were good.
Yeah.
They've been, later on, a lot of guys had a problem. They want to go up to 20 millimeter cannon and stuff like that. You must remember that the Bakers and Charles, at the P-51, Baker, B, and C, each one of them had 4 guns, 2 in each wing. The Dog had doubled that, it had 6 guns, but it had 3 in each wing. So when you open fire with 6 50 caliber machine guns, you're going to create a hell of a pattern of destruction. The 4 will work very well if they're put in their property. Unfortunately, ours were not, but they couldn't do anything about that initially, but later on they could. The damn things were jammed, so you never knew what you're going to get. You might have one gun working by the time you got down there.
Could you describe your duties during a mission? What problems did you encounter, and how did you contribute to your fighter wing success on a mission?
Well, I think your contribution on a mission is maintain your position within the organization. This requires that you, if you're leading a flight, you get the flight in the correct position with the squadron. If you're leading a squadron, you get it in the correct position with respect to the group. I never led a group, so I don't know. I never got up that high. But I think I could have done just as good as any of the rest of them could. But anyway, I never led the group. That was the main thing you could do. And what was that question? If you'll repeat that, please.
I was just wondering what some of your what problems did you encounter, or how does your job contribute to your fighter wing success?
Well, okay, that main thing, if everybody's there in station formation, you got a good shot at delivering 46 airplanes cocked, ready to go in the target area. That's about half of it. The second thing is keep your eyes open, stay alert. I mean, just remember, flying that airplane's easy. You don't even do that. All you got to do is 2 fingers, just hold on the stick like that, and that'll get you there. But you want to keep that neck swiveled and looking, and look, and look, and look, and look. And it is disgusting when the flight leader has to call out that they're being attacked. It is. And the guys behind you are supposed to see. And if they don't, you know damn good and well that they weren't doing their job right. And that's an early detection of the opposition is the second contribution you can make. And the third thing is that once you've seen him, do something about it. Don't just sit there and whistle. Just go kill him as quick as you can.
Could you tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences of your missions flown over Europe? Ones that really stick out?
Oh, I guess the day we lost Chuck Yeager, I guess that was stick in my throat. I don't know why. He's still around. We were had a mission going down to Bordeaux, France. Now, nobody had ever been to Bordeaux. So that's a long way from Leicester, England, down to Bordeaux, France. And my flight, somebody had to abort after takeoff because of mechanical difficulties with an aircraft. And Chuck Yeager was signed up that day to fly spare for the squadron. So each squadron always had a couple of spares flying around to fill in so that we anticipate to make up for these losses that we knew were going to occur because of mechanical difficulties. Everything's not going to work right, that's all there is to it. But Yeager was flying and filling in as number 4 and with us, and a very fine officer named Christ Almighty. Just a minute, we're going to get him. It might be. Any other time, his name is right there. Russ Spicer, general officer. He's dead now, but Russ Spicer was full colonel, and he came down and took over our group a few days before this Bordeaux mission. And we were escorting B-24s, and the B-24s had a hard time handling that altitude. They really did. They were just, I guess, basically it was just a tough airplane to do it with. And they were straggling back there. They were not holding their own formation close enough and tight enough. If you get a box of bombers that's hanging back about 10 miles behind this bunch up here, then these are the ones those stragglers are the ones the Germans are going to attack. So anytime you see an outfit straggling, the first thing you do, you send somebody back to make sure they're okay. Well, old Robespierre, Lucky Pierre, back you go to take care of these straggling B-24s. Well, when I got there, when I pulled up the 24th, everything looked normal. I couldn't see anything. But I made 180 and pulled up on the 24's right wing side out there. And we just got into position, and somebody called brake. I think it was Yeager called brake. So I broke, and when I broke, a brake consists of changing your direction and your attitude. It changed everything you can change. I mean, the throttle, anything. But do something different. So we were coming around a big circle, and I picked up a 190 and got him just right and took him down to I shot pieces off of him almost as big as you are. And he's going into the 1010 Southern Cast down there. So I had to pull up because I didn't know anything about how thick it was or anything about it. So I came back and I just claimed a damaged aircraft. And then when I got back the weather as usual was bad in England. I had to man at some RAF base that night, and interesting evening. Before it was all over with. So the next day I got up to Leiston to tell them that, and that's when I found out we not only lost Chuck Yeager, we'd also lost Russ Spicer, two men, both are prominent officers. Yeager is a fine test pilot, and Spicer was commander of the Air Force in Germany later on, having spent time as a PW for about a year. So I imagine those guys could click their heels all they want to. He's going to help you. He will get you straightened out. Russ Spicer was a fine officer and a very good pilot and somebody you enjoyed working with. Yeager's very competent. And later on, we visited, and he wanted me to fly with him, and I kept putting it off. He finally told me, he said, Obie, I've got a letter from somebody there in Bordeaux or near wherever it was about that mission that day. And he said it confirms that 190 hit the ground down there. And I said, well, yeah. He said, I'll give you the letter if you fly with me. So I said, okay. So I went and flew with him. And he did. He had the letter. And this guy that wrote the letter was a dentist who was an amateur historian. And what he had done, he'd run around there in France picking up pieces of memorabilia of airplanes. He had guns out of Jaegers 51 and stuff like that. But he had the skinny on this German who was in the 190 and had a picture of him. A very nice looking young man. Of course, he's dead, but there he is. But that was confirmation that that one went down. It wasn't just a damage, but it didn't make any difference. I didn't need any more. All you have to do is get 5, and you're in the Federations Association. Hell, that's all. I never didn't have to put in for it. So that takes care of that mission, and interesting mission in that we were lucky. The other one of interest is the Berlin mission, the first time we stood target area support for the bombers operating in Berlin. And Tommy Hayes, bless his heart, he'd always get stuck with some of these damnedest things. We have another change in squadron command and group commanders because we just lost Spicer at Bordeaux, and I think the next day we were headed for Berlin. And it was the 5th on down to Bordeaux, and it was the 6th to Berlin. And Tommy Hayes was leading that mission because our new group commander had to abort on the takeoff because of some mechanical problems with his aircraft. So Tommy's going to lead, and he's leading the group. And it was really a wonderful thing for all of us. I don't think we had, I don't know how many airplanes we got into the target area with, but sure as hell nowhere near half our group strength, and we lost a lot of them by abortion and things like it. But we managed to, that was our first good day. We shot down over 20 German airplanes that day, and we didn't lose a man in aerial combat over Berlin that I know of, none. Which was very, very good, and we sure as hell needed it, because the day after that, here came that general that's been sitting up there, up in the country up there, and he wants to know what happened to Russ Spicer, who was his old buddy, and that's why he showed up. He didn't come down there to decorate us or give us a good word or anything like that. As soon as he found out what had happened on the Berlin marching line, he was very kind, very generous to us. Get you some new airplanes if you need it. He was very nice, he really was. But they had said that he came down to compliment us, and I don't think so. He came down to find out what happened to Spicer. Spicer had been his chief of staff of that fighter wing before he came down and took over the group. So they were old buddies way back. You know. And those are two interesting missions that stand out in my memory. And Berlin, particularly Tom Hayes, did a good job. And he doesn't know it, but he really did a fine job.
How many enemy kills, to your credit, did you end up with by the war's end?
Me?
Yes.
I have 7 altogether.
7.
I think the good book says 5.5. The good book's wrong, but 7 though. But that's kind of hard to get, really. It takes a long time. I was flying roughly 11 missions a month, and I flew 77 missions, and I can't remember a time that we ever made contact with the Germans that we didn't have with a firefight of some kind. That's all there is to it. So we're really kind of lucky. And the group did remarkably good. That hurt. I think they're about number 2 in scoring in England, and they were not in England all that long. The old 56th group and the 4th group, some of those outfits have been there a long time before we got there. But we got to go to the target area. You're going to get some action there. That's all there is to it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, very good answer.
Okay.
I was wondering, do you remember your 5th kill, the one that made you an ace?
No, I don't.
Okay.
In those days, nobody was interested in being worrying too much about being an ace. My worry was when I'd come back. Usually what happened, I'd get a few days off in a row. I'd go down to London and have a good time, me and somebody else, and come back. And the first thing I want to know is how was Anderson doing? God damn, he would always shoot down 1 or 2 airplanes while I'm gone. And therefore, there's no way in God's green earth that we're going to end up having about the same number of airplanes. And hell, he's a good friend of mine. He's a fine man, don't kid yourself. He's a wonderful, wonderful pilot. He is the kind of guy that you could build an Air Force around. But he was lucky as hell. The Germans would always show up on missions that Anderson flew, I swear to God. And I wasn't quite that fortunate. But they had plenty of them around, but I didn't want to see him getting out ahead of me. So, but as you well know, he got about 16 airplanes to his credit, and I got 7, so there's a hell of a difference there. And of course, he flew 2 tours, and I didn't. I flew 1. I figured that was enough. I knew how.
How heavy was the attrition rate due to losses in your squadron?
Well, I would say it was fairly heavy, but then I have a rather difficult time from the seat I occupy in appraising that question, because that question is best answered by fighter command. They know how many 51s they got now, how many jug outfits are running, 38 outfits, and they can tell pretty well how by their total loss rate, and then they distribute it down. But the target area is damn sure going to be where the fighting is. That's all there is to it. If you go to Berlin, you're going to see the crowds. They'll show up. And before that, they had gone on this. We actually went in February, some places, 15th or 20th, whenever we started. That was the so-called big week, and what they were going to do is take out the German manufacturing capability, and in the process of doing so, we will see the Luftwaffe in the air. That part's all right, but they wanted to make damn sure they didn't get replacements in there, so they're going after the motor manufacturers, the airframe manufacturers, who was William Messerschmitt and Boom Voss, people like that. And then they work over their motor manufacturing places, Mercedes, BMW, things like it. And the end product of this was the destruction of the capability of the German Air Force to make up for their losses, that we were creating the losses right there. And they just weren't going to be able to get the replacements in. And you can tell from their training, hell, that you look, talk to some of these guys, or read about them, and it's remarkable that they did as good as they did. And on top of that, just remember, they never quit. At the last day of the war, if they had an airplane and they could get it off the ground, they're going to try to come up. And you have to give them credit for that, and that's all there is to it. You hope you're there with 2 airplanes when they come up, so to make sure he doesn't go up the next day. They will fight that, I'll say that for them.
So, what was your general impression of German pilots was pretty high?
Yeah, we're scared to death of every one of them, for Christ's sake. When you get in behind one of them, and you're lucky, you got the position and everything, you get a few shots off, and out he comes. You don't know if you've got a general officer who's made up his mind he ain't not going to get blown out of the sky, or a brand new kid who's green that wants to stay alive, because they're both going to do the same thing. They're going to pop that canopy and get out of that airplane. And the hell with this damn dogfighting. That's just somebody else. Another day. You're not going to catch me in the same position. Now, you being the aggressor, you're not going to let him get away with that, because the next time he may not be in front of you. He may be behind you. So that's the way that game works. Don't ever give him a chance. And have to be respectful for him. Those guys kind of weird. As you know, we have an ongoing engagement at the present time in the Middle East, and there's no, as far as I'm concerned, there's no such thing as a cheap war. Now they may think a cheap war is fighter pilots' war. Fighter pilots die just as hard as anybody else. And the hell of it is, you can get away with it. You only lose one man and one piece of equipment. You didn't. It's not like big bomber runs of the Second World War or anything else, or losing the infantry or a division or something like that. So therefore, it's not cheap as far as I'm concerned. I'm very, very much opposed to it. It takes a long time to make a good fighter pilot. You don't get him in 5 minutes, and they can lose one of them damn quick too. So therefore, I forget what my thought train was, but there's just no easy way to do these kind of things. And we were talking. What was the question?
I was just kind of wondering what your general impression of the pilots were, their skills.
Well, they first and fundamentally, to make a good fighter pilot, you've got to have a certain amount of aggression. You want to have somebody who is astute, very interested in what they're doing. I've never run off anything except one or two guys that didn't, I think, perform in flying the aircraft correctly. The rest of it, once they get that far, they're in pretty fair shape. The individual, it's an unfair statement, but in all probability, a lot of it is luck. There's a lot of men who are better pilots than I am, certainly. And there's a lot of men who just never had the chance. That's all there is to it. It'd be like O'Brien going down to London and missing the damn Anderson gets a victory or something while you're gone, you see. That's chance. Even at that particular time, there was no difference between them, you see. So therefore, there are many men who never got into a position to do anything about it. And so we must not degrade them because of that. They were perfectly willing to do it. They just didn't happen to get lucky and be in the right place at the right time. Makes a hell of a lot of difference. That's all there is to it.
How do you feel P-51 stacked up against the German fighters and also our fellow Allied fighters, like the Thunderbolts?
Damn near got myself whipped answering that question. When I came in that night, I was telling you, I came up when I lost Chuck Yeager that day. Well, Bob Moore and I got into England that night in very bad weather. It was lousy. And we landed at an English base named Ford. And a flight of Jubs came in, and 4 of them. And one of them went out here and crashed, and 3 of them landed. And I thought that was rather unusual.
Jubs, you mean the Thunderbolts?
Yeah.
Okay.
P-47. That was an unusual demonstration of handling the aircraft. But the guys that got out of the airplane were kind of interesting. They had on RAF flying suits with American flying jackets and cactus bars up here. So we were up there having a few drinks at the bar that evening, and I got to talk to this one old boy, and he had never seen the P-51, and I hadn't messed around with the Jugs either. And so we got to talking, and I told him, I said, hell, that 51 will eat you up. And he said, I don't think so. And I said, well, I think it will. And he said, I said, let's go down tomorrow morning and find out. And he said, that's a good deal. I'd like to do that. And so after we talked like this for about an hour or so, this other guy was sitting there with him, and he didn't have much to say. And they left, and one of these American boys came over to me, and he said, you know who you're talking to? And I said, no, I don't know anything about it. He said, that's Michael Gladich. And I said, oh? He said, yeah. He said, he's an ace in the Polish Air Force, in the French Air Force, in the RAF, and now he's in the 56th group. And I think he's an ace in every damn one of them. So I said, well, I think so. I thought, well, 8 o'clock in the morning we're going to find out. So I went down that flight line about 6 o'clock and took a look at those airplanes. And on the side of Mike Gladich's airplane, there was a bunch of black German crosses. Probably must have been about 15 or so across there, maybe more than that. And I looked at my airplane, the only thing I had on it was a serial number. So I thought maybe I better go ahead and get out of here now. So I knew what I thought I could do, but I never was sure how it would work out. So, okay. Later on I flew jugs quite a bit. Later on, I ended up being a test pilot, so I got to fly quite a bit of them. And the Jug is a good airplane, but it's an entirely different type of airplane. The 51 was a remarkably good airplane compared to all the American fighters, and particularly as far as the German fighters, I would say it was superior. I always thought it was. Now, see, this is half the battle right there. If you see the other guy first, and you think you've got a better airplane, and you think you can shoot better than he can, well, goddamn, you got the battle won. You haven't done anything, right? Well, this is what I'm about to mess I'm about to get myself into. You see, you think this when you're fighting the German. That 190 was not a bad airplane, and it was not liquid cooled engine. So it was air cooled. Therefore, it didn't have the fatal flaw that the Spitfire or the 51 or 38s. Most of our inline stuff is all water cooled or so-called liquid cooled, and therefore, if you hit the coolant system, it's not very long before it shows up. I mean, he's going to be spraying coolant, and he's got to come out of it. So that 190 didn't have that built-in problem, and they're pretty fast, pretty rugged. And I always give them a little bit more respect than the 109s, although German pilots preferred the 109 to the 190. I would like the 190 myself personally. And now as far as it's much superior to the British built their airplanes to defend England with, and they weren't built for standing target area support in Berlin, Germany, or Munich, or they weren't interested in it. After they moved their armies on the continent, then they'll build an air force on the continent. There's different ways of getting the same thing done. You know. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, very well. Were you ever wounded in combat?
Just got shot by my flight leader, assistant flight leader shot me with a .45 pistol.
Really?
Yeah.
So I guess you could say it was a friendly fire incident.
yeah, well, he bless his heart. What happened, they give us the pistols, and they made the mistake of giving us 21 rounds of ammunition at the same time. Now that's a mistake right there. You can give them the pistols after you give them 21 rounds of ammunition the next day. 2 days later, give them the pistols, and you might get away with it. Well, poor Al, he didn't know. He didn't know anything about guns. He'd come in here and pointed that .45 at me and said, "You woke me up this morning." Bang, and the damn .45 goes bluey. And hell, it's in the air, and it comes down. And Graham, who was at that time was squadron commander, he picked me up and took me up to the infirmary up there. And the only thing they did, and it was stop and think about it, it's kind of interesting. They never told me what the hell they were doing, but I know now what they were doing. As long as it didn't hit the bone, you got a pretty good chance. And what that thing had done, that projectile had, I don't think it had severed the nerve, but it damn near severed them completely. So that everything, as far as I was concerned, the ability to use this arm hinged on where those nerves rejuvenated themselves and came back. First thing they wanted to do is find out if there was any bone damage. If there was, and then they're going to take an arm off. And so the interesting thing about this was, and I didn't know at the time, they had never done any medical evacuation by air. All the wounded people had been moved by back into an ambulance. But they're going to fly me from or wherever I was in California, Oroville, I guess, down to March Field. And this was going to be an air medical thing. So hell, they wrote, I bet you they filled up books with the stuff that those guys could write about this big trip, and all that. Well, nobody was around when it time to come back. When I talked my way out of the hospital, the only thing they asked me, said, "Where are you going to go?" I said, "Well, I'm going up to Oroville." I said, "Okay." So I went down the flight line, no more there, but twin-engine UC-78, which is a Cessna. And so I flew co-pilot in that thing back up to Oroville. And of course, it's easy to steer. You just steer with one hand. This hand didn't work, so it didn't make any difference. And then I didn't do anything for probably 3 months, I know. Because if I didn't fly when I flew in February of '44, I was going to lose a bundle of money. You get paid, but you have to fly 4 hours every month to be able to draw your flight pay. And your flight pay was 50% of your base pay. So I needed that base pay. And so I, very fortunately, this doctor who was taking care of me was a friend of mine. He became a friend of mine for other reasons. And he made sure that I got a release to fly. And so I got the 51 off the ground. I started racking up a little time. I didn't have to worry about it. I got my time made up so I get that paycheck. You know. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Could you describe your duties between missions on days you didn't fly? What were you responsible for? Anything at all?
I was waiting around for the next mission. You never knew. I didn't know myself personally. I'm sure other people did. I didn't look at the long-range weather forecast because once we got in a position to go for combat, well, the next day was always going to be a combat mission. And if it wasn't, it would be a stranger, you know. Sometimes there have been days where we'd fly 2 missions a day. One early in the morning, one maybe later on in the afternoon, something like that. So I don't remember we had any duty assignments that required any. Now they do. They give everybody half a dozen jobs to do, and no time and no money and all that junk. But we didn't have those conditions. No, we were there for one purpose. That was to fly and fight, and that's all it was to it. Very simple. And be successful, or you won't be back.
Overall, what did you think of the officers and the fellow soldiers you served with, in general?
No, I think it's one of the finest group of men I ever knew. And so,
is there any? Is there a few in particular that you most respected? You already mentioned
Tommy Hayes.
Spicer.
Yeah, we got a lot of respect for Tom Hayes. All those guys you see in those pictures, they're all those are still alive, and they're probably not very many of them. They're all very fine men. They did good work. You must remember, just look at some of that picture on the wall there. They're young men. They're just about your age, or younger.
Oh, younger.
Yeah. Now, I think at that time, I myself was 22 years of age. Anderson's about the same. We were both flight leaders in that outfit. That guy, again, up at the top up there, he's a major, came out of the 4th Air Force. Bless his heart, I don't know whatever happened to it. He had started out in Spitfires, you know, he'd been around their horn a little bit. And they're still young. We used to get tickled and see and somebody who was 30 years old said, "My God, he's ready to retire."
Wish I could retire.
You couldn't get away with that. Well, you see, you don't need that today. Today, hell, they can spend 5 years in the service trying to get as much time as we could get in a month. You know, I mean, we did a hell of a lot of flying in a relatively short period of time. Bud Anderson and myself were both one time assigned back to fly P-39s from Buffalo to the West Coast. So we're making a transcontinental run with those 39s. And God, we had 39s scattered all over the U.S. I mean, you know, we never had any trouble with the Russians until we gave them the P-39, and that's when our trouble was. And they weren't so damn sure that we were hoping they'd win the war. But that was interesting. I remember one time I left Buffalo, 6 of us, and we delivered 2 to the West Coast. At Hammer Field, there was about 30 minutes flying time out of Hamilton. And the teletype came down and said, "Turn those airplanes around and take them to Middletown, Pennsylvania," which I've never heard of. That's what we did. Take them back there for modification purposes. So you can see there wasn't a great deal of forethought done, or we could have found Middletown, Pennsylvania a hell of a lot easier from Buffalo, New York than we could from hauling it back from California. So, and this is how things work. I mean, what the hell, we were damn lucky to be able to build the airplanes. The other guys didn't even have the airplanes. So America was really doing very good in spite of what she had to work with. That's all there was to it.
How did people entertain themselves on leave? What sort of things did you do between missions? On leave, for example.
What kind of things I do? What?
When you were on leave, what kind of things would you do?
You don't want to really know that. Well, we did not work down at the local church. I can say that for you. After all that was a time to release pent-up emotions. And, you know, the funny thing about Hollywood takes this attitude that they can go give everybody a bottle of whiskey and an airplane and all like that. I didn't see any of that. The guys that come in after a mission, and this is really when you found out what went on. When you sit around the officers' club and have a couple of drinks, you'll find out who's missing and how things went. And you talk to other guys, other squatters with you, you know. And I did not see excessive drinking. That's all there was to it. That work is hard enough to do with a good head. And you can't go down there. Nobody's going to fly with a drunk. That's all there is to it. Now, Hollywood doesn't believe this. They think hell, the black, I don't know what the hell their outfit is. Boynton's outfit. I don't believe that crap at all. You know. I know we didn't do it. We didn't have to do it. And I don't think anybody was going to mess with you if you did do that. That's all there is to it. So when you get a few days off of leave time, you can do as you wish in London, because anybody who's down in London is down there for the same damn reason you are, to have a good time. That's all they're going to do. And they've all got a little pocket full of money and a little time. That's all you need. The rest of it will work itself out. And I've always thought that was whatever the guys did at that time. The big boys would make room for you. In other words, they're not going to throw you in the pokey, and if you've got the pokey, they're going to dig you out anyway, because they can always use you to go fight, you know. So that you got kind of a blessing when you went down there. And the people were very nice. You know, a lot of people don't realize that they didn't have much. They were making sacrifices well far and beyond what we're asked to do. They didn't have the food. They didn't have much of anything. And yet they were willing to put up with us, which I think they took a hell of a lot on their part. And we should thank them for that. And I do anyway.
So was the overall civilian attitudes from the British pretty positive then? There weren't any...
They were lovely people to us. You would be too if somebody's come in and saved your life. Would you be kind to them and take care of your family, make sure you got some food on the table and things like this. They didn't have that. They were suffering. And matter of fact, we did not drink. I don't remember drinking a glass of milk. I remember I was down one time. Of all things, I had somehow they had something growing around there, and I never had any allergies in my life, but I was allergic to whatever the hell it was. And I was trying to fly, and I wouldn't come off of ops. I was trying to fly with these night fighter glasses on, because my eyes were just watering, you know, hell. And finally the guys went to the doc and get him out of here. So Doc said, "O'Brien, you're going down to the rest home." So, why? Well, I don't know. Me and old Daddy Rabbit, they sent both of us down there. So we're down there at dinner time, and we were being served in English for a lovely table. And we were well served. The gentleman asked me if I would care for some of this in this bowl. And I said, "What is it?" He said, "That's ice cream."
Wow.
Didn't even recognize it.
Wow.
And so you did not drink milk. You didn't try not to eat any butter. And certainly sugars and things like this. The little things that we think we are fine, you know, they didn't have them. That's all there was to it. So you had to keep this in the back of your head when you were dealing with English people. And they were all very generous to us. So, come in.
Herbie, don't keep your friend too long.
I'll shut up in a minute.
When were you discharged, and what did you do in the days and weeks after your discharge?
Well, I was discharged, I think it was 1946 or 48, somewhere around there. I forget which year. I went back to the University of Tulsa and finished up my academic work. And see, when I went in the Air Corps, you were required to have 2 years of college to get in at that time. And I had 2 years of college, okay. But I needed to come back and finish up and get some kind of a degree of professional significance, and I picked the field of geology. My father had been in the oil business for many years, and the University of Tulsa was about one of the top schools in the country. So that's where I went and studied geology, and then I got a master's degree there, and that put me in a position to get a pretty good job. And I worked for a major oil company, too long, I think. And then I quit and formed my own outfit and got lucky. It's just, I'll take that luck any day over skill. It's different. That's all there is to it.
Did you take advantage of the GI Bill for school?
Oh, hell yeah, that was the smartest thing they ever did. That was the only smart thing they did, really. That GI Bill was wonderful. You stop and think of the homes that were built and the educations that it provided a basic foundation for. That was a real good deal for everybody. Uncle Sam sure got his money back out of it, because you bring the intellect level of the nation up about almost 50%, probably, or maybe better. Then they're employed, and you turn around and tax the employment. Well, hell, you're going to get your money back. And that's what they did. And it didn't take all that long to do it. And it's a good deal for everybody. And they ought to keep that thing going. I don't know if they do or not anymore. I imagine they do.
My father's Vietnam, we still have that.
They do?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing.
Well, that's fine. That's wonderful. They should, There's more kinds of pay than just money.
Do you continue any relationships that were fostered during the war? Do you still?
Oh, hell yeah. I still see Anderson whenever I can. I haven't been able to travel much. I've had some health problems the last few years, but up till this time, matter of fact, that picture up there on the wall was taken at Anderson's place, and I always liked to visit with anybody like that. I always did. And there's not very many of us left, really. Maybe of that group of men there, probably 25% of them still around. The rest of them are long gone. So if you get to see Tommy Hayes and Pete Peterson and Bud Anderson, that's how I used to all the time. We used to get together with them about every 2 or 3 years, something like that.
It's been 50 plus years since the war. What is your overall impression of the war and your role in it?
What is the question again?
I guess what I'm trying to ask is, after all this time, what's your overall impression of the war now and your role
That
in
war?
it? Yes,
Or
World War II.
War? World War II.
Mm-hmm.
In retrospect, basically, I could have said we could have done a hell of a lot better job of getting ready for it. We knew what we were doing was going to embroil us in a war. I don't think there's any doubt that the political party whose edifice was Franklin Roosevelt intended that we get in that war. This was the only way in the world he was going to get the economy of the United States out of a doldrum. So he had ships running around in the Atlantic Ocean giving convoy support to British ships, and wondered why the Germans were sinking them. Hell, I'd have sunk them, so would anybody else. And to tell the Japs that it is the policy of this nation that we're going to control your oil and gas products. You're not going to have any. Well, you can only do this thing to people so long, and they're going to take an action against you. So they knew what the hell they were doing. If they didn't, I'm sure wrong as hell, but I think they did know what they were doing. But they didn't make any plans for what the results would be, what they could anticipate the enemy, so-called enemy, are going to do back in retribution to you. So the Germans started sinking a few of the ships, and you can see what the Japs did. And then they had to pay a hell of a price later on. Both of those nations did. And I don't know how many Germans they lost in the Second World War, but I would imagine it's several million. And the Japs, to this day, I don't have any use for them. So I don't make any apologies. I don't. That's all there is to it.
What are some of the experiences that stand out most prominently after all this time? Things that you keep going back to?
Bad weather. I haven't forgotten it to this day. You guys fly. You must. Okay. Boy, I'll tell you one thing, I'd make a Christian out of you. Yeah, that's all there is to it. Usually you imagine getting off the ground with about a 500-foot ceiling, and you're still in it at 20,000 feet, and you've been on those gauges, and those guys beside you, they're depending on you, because they're just flying formation. That's the only thing they see is a little place on your wing. So you're going to be on there, and you're going to pay attention to what the hell you're doing. You do a good job of it. And no matter what fighter aircraft it is, I imagine they're all the same. They're not going to forgive you for making mistakes on instrument work. That's all there is to it. So if you're going to fly, the first thing you're going to do after you learn how to fly is become proficient in instrument work, because you're going to need it someplace in your career. That's all there is to it. And you might as well get out ahead of it and get it done first. And that's the one thing I remember more than anything else. I was in goddamn ice on that gun sight thing out there in front. It was there. That's all there was to it. And, and when we come back, remember we didn't have any way to get into that airfield. They didn't have any beams. Hell no. They're back in the States. They got beams, but you didn't have anything. You had a radar directional information. They could tell you a heading to get towards that base. That's the only thing they could give you. And what you actually had was your last landmark you had over the continent of Europe, and a heading when you got within radio range of Leiston, which was, I think, what they call it, 100 miles or something like that. So if you left the Dutch coast, say someplace over the Frisian Islands, on a heading of 270, you're going to hit England. But you got to hit England in the vicinity of Leiston, and you might have about a 600-foot ceiling or 500-foot ceiling, and it's going to be a little nippy, my dear friend. Telling the difference in color between those clouds and that water is critical. I mean, you don't get two shots at it, you get one. And so when you come out down there, you better be right. And we got a lot of them in. I was surprised in number in. And we had not the RAF at this time, at that particular time, and it irritated the hell out of me. I found it out from an RAF officer I was working with. They were bringing their guys in with radio-controlled approaches. They were talking to them. They'd say, turn 10 degrees right. No, he turned 10 degrees, turn 10 degrees left, and go down about 200 feet. And they were talking him in on the radar. Hell, we didn't have anything like that. And so you can see what those gray-haired guys think, well, hell, we'd crash a few airplanes if we could get some more. And that's exactly the way they looked at it. And it was wrong, but that's what they did.
Just a few more questions, basically. How did the service and the experiences affect your life?
Well, of course, it's like anybody else's experience in the wartime like that. It'll make a severe impression. I would never have gone on to get educated, I don't think, without the benefits of the GI Bill. And my first home was had a GI Bill on that, so that was beneficial. Of course, I didn't even think about the GI Bill at that time. There wasn't any GI Bill. All you're going to do is you're just going to go and do what you're going to do is to protect your nation. That's the first thing you do. The rest of it worked out to be pretty good. Repeat the question, please.
How did your service and your experiences in the service affect your life?
I would say they dictate the manner in which you conduct yourself for the rest of your life. It's pretty much controlled by how you do in the service. If you do poorly in the service, you'll probably do poorly in the rest of your life. And you're the one who decides what poor is, not somebody else. You know whether you're putting out right and whether you're going to get the job done. And so therefore, you make your own profound decisions of what's going to happen to you yourself. The service may restrict that for a while, but it's going to be for a limited period of time, 3 or 4 years. But you will generate a path that you're going to be following from there on. What else was in that question?
just in general, you survived the I imagine the sheer terror of combat, the excitement of flying. You flew in a P-51 Mustang. You fought in World War II. You know, how did those things drive what you did later? How did it drive your career?
Well,
You know,
you always look back at anything you've done, and it's pretty hard to think of anything you come up against that was tougher than what you went through during that particular 2-year period of time. Really. Nobody was trying to kill you when you're out going on a well site or something like that.
Yeah.
Looking down that microscope, making a map, something like that. Hell, that's easy. I mean, nothing in there is daunting. There's no real competition in there. It's kind of like going to school. The only competition you have is with the guys that you like, right there. You're sitting down there with. I get this one guy, hell, I could never beat him. I didn't give a damn what I did. If I got a 98, he would get a 99. And this happened all the time. But it didn't bother me after a while. I just decided I wasn't going to be able to beat him. I was learning the hard way. You know, he could beat me. He was brilliant. Unfortunately, he died early. But he was a very damn good geologist. And he's also a damn good student. And the worst thing was he had 2 degrees I didn't know about. He had a degree in engineering. It was kind of helped him before he rolled over into geology and that. So he was pretty good. Matter of fact, he worked for a year with Phillips. No, he was with, I don't even know their names anymore. Their name used to be Stamina, and they changed it. They became Pan Am, and who they are today, I haven't the biggest idea in the world.
we work up in the Panhandle Field, as a matter of fact.
Sir?
We work in the Panhandle Field for Phillips.
Is that right?
Yeah, we do. So I recognize you.
There's a lot of standalone wells around up there.
Yeah.
Old wells.
Well, they were a good company, and Humboldt, Exxon is a damn good company.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you get out in the field like that, and if you have a problem, you need a joint of 4 inch or something like that, and you haven't got one on, you can go down there and bum or talk to them little boy at Exxon or something like that, and they'll loan you one. Sure, they will. And you'll be delighted to pay them back, and you'll make sure they're taken care of too. So, your relationship with other people are pretty well dictated by how you conduct yourself in the past. It just flows over. That's all there is to it.
I guess the last question I'd like to ask you, is there anything you'd like to add that we've not covered in this interview?
No, my wife is about to go through the roof. We can cut out some of this stuff. You know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We got about 8 minutes left on the tape. If you want to just visit, I wanted to ask him a question.
If you don't mind.
Whenever you were flying P-51, I'm into the sensory experience of it. You know, did you have any how did the P-51 smell? Did it have any kind of feel to it, or a sound that just was unlike any other sound? Or are there any
So
sound?
there's any doubt about the sound of it was something you'll never forget. That Merlin Rolls-Royce engine had a sound you don't get in Allison, you don't get it in any other inline engine. It had a sound all its own. And it's a common among 51 pilots. Or Merlin, yeah, I can't remember any other airplane powered with that. I always wanted to see that. Later on in the war, they built a P-63, which was a double-chrome P-51. But I wanted to see that thing with a Griffin engine in it. And they never did it. And boy, if they'd have put that Griffin in, hell, it would have eaten anything else as lunch for it right now. The airplane smell, they're kind of like new cars. You know,
Sure.
a new car has an odor all its own. Now you can't describe it to anybody, but it smells good. I think. Most of the time, I think it smells good. You know, I'm sure everybody else thinks the same thing or not. Airplanes are kind of like that. You know, after you've had your own airplane a while, you don't pay attention to that odor. But a new airplane is kind of like a new car. You know, there's no place in there that's bright and shiny and says I'm brand new, but you can sniff around it. It's new.
Some of the guys we talked to, like B-17 gunners and stuff, they describe the B-17 having like a smell of like vomit almost. You know, I had the paint they used. Some guys would describe it as like just sweat. It smells like sweat and fear inside some of these planes.
Well, if you wanted to get that impression, what you ought to do is watch a fighter outfit after the mission, and they're putting up their flying suits. If you look at most of them across the back, they're white. They're just white streaks. You know, that's a sweat. That little boy
yeah.
that's been scared to death.
The salt and the sweat. and all
Yeah,
that.
hell yeah. That's what you're seeing right there. And I got tickled. Some guy I don't know. It's Bud Anderson. The Japs were paying some ungodly prices for these leather flying jackets. I don't know what it was, about $650, something way up there, you know. I said, hell, they would go crazy if we could just give them some stinking old flying suit that would hang up around Tonopah someplace. He'd stand in the corner. But that took me and just popping off. Now, what do you do? What do you like to do?
Well, I'm actually my job is I'm a geophysicist, but all my master's degree and bachelor's degrees in geology with concentrating in geophysics and everything. I want to get my pilot's license someday, and I'd like to do that at some point, but right now I don't have it. So joining the CAF and working with the West Houston Squadron is about as close as I can get to.
You make it. You
Yeah.
take your time. Don't get in a hurry. How about you?
I'm a geophysicist also, and
This is amazing. Can you spell the word?
Barely.
yeah.
Just barely.
Yeah. Well, that's how we all end up in the same boat. I went to school, got a master's degree in geology, and Standard said, you're a geophysicist. After I'd worked in geology for, they were around a peculiar outfit in those days. You could work in the field of geology for maybe a year or two, and then they'd boot you over into geophysics, and you'd go over to geophysics. And it wasn't because I was particularly well trained, which I was not. I had a hell of a lot of hours without training different. But man, hell, we started out and you go out there and hustle the jugs, help them get the whole goddamn shittery working, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you started. And you don't start at the top.
Mm-hmm.
You're not a geophysicist for a long time yet. You got a lot of maps to make.
Yeah, things have changed a lot. We talked to some people that have been with our company a while, and that's exactly how they started. They started off with the field crews, collecting the data,
Yeah.
and they worked in their position. But Ryan and I, we got out of school and they just threw us right in it. I mean, we didn't.
Well, did you study geophysics in school?
Yeah.
Well, that's cheating. you're supposed to study geology or physics or
We'll pick up
math.
geophysics later.
Yeah, but the geo part can come later on. But they have most of them have changed their ways of doing things. It used to be departmentalized everything. In other words, geophysics just didn't mess with geologists. Geologists didn't mess with geophysics. I think the geologists thought we were a bunch of snakes that come out at night to bite them or something like that, which is not true. But they would departmentalize the thing, keep them over there. Just like you never mess with petroleum engineers, you know, hell, they was over here. But I think they've grown away from that now, the companies have. They more or less accept an explorationist would be a better way to look at it.
That's true.
Because we expect you to do more than just look at a rock or
Mm-hmm.
look at a set of records or to look at some pressure charts on a well, a few things like that. So I think that's the way they're all going now. I was fortunate. My company used to believe that to start with. And I think we could, that was Standard of Cal, was who it was. And they had an outfit in Louisiana called the California Company. And they had an outfit in Texas called Standard Oil Company of Texas. And the head honcho of that, who was the exploration man, that was his philosophy. He didn't go for departmental anyway. So you can circulate through them and acquire the knowledge there. But that was about it. Now, is there anything else?
I had one more question. Getting back to flying. After you got out of the service, were you able ever to get your hands on a P-51 again and go flying? Or
No.
The last time you flew was whenever you were in the service?
No. I stepped out of that thing. That was it. You know, I had offered them a deal, and they said they weren't interested in it. I said, that's fine. But I'm not interested in that. Never touched a one, and had no intention of touching one.
Really? So after you got out, you were okay? You walked away from
That's right.
P-51 for the rest of your
Yeah,
life?
that's right. What am I going to learn?
Well,
What
I
are you
just-
going to do with that thing that I haven't done?
Well, that's true. I just thought some guys might want to keep flying it because they love flying it.
No, I don't. I used to like to fly too,
Yeah.
until I found something else to do that thing like making a living. You know,
Sure.
but I wasn't getting paid to just fly that airplane. That's all
Yeah.
there was to it. And Wright, hell, I got to fly all the different kind of airplanes I wanted to. Hell, I checked out B-25 and B-17.
Really?
Oh yeah, just got more knobs is all you got with it.
A
And,
few more engines to play with.
huh?
A few more engines to play with.
Yeah, sure. You can get. Oh, you got that thing?
I think we're about